We have with us today Sarah Zafra, Jonni Judd, Susie Sato, and Warren Livingston. We start off with our first question. When were you aware of yourself as a member of a particular racial, ethnic, religious, or social group?
I'll answer that. As far as I remember, I can't remember when I wasn't aware of being a member of the black race or Negro race as I was coming up. Even though in the early years you pretty much lived in a section that was, I was born in Oklahoma, and we lived in a section that was all black, and the only contact you had with other racial or ethnic groups was when you happened to go to a movie once every month or so, or if you happened to go downtown to do some shopping. Otherwise you had very little contact with other people. Mm-hmm. But we knew who we were.
Are you interested in things that didn't happen in Mesa or only Mesa?
Well, in Mesa, but if you have something that you feel is worthwhile, please share it with us.
Well, this was not here. This was in the Midwest, but I was raised a Christian Scientist, which is a religion that does not believe in using doctors. And I just noticed that people would look at me rather strangely if I would mention my religion. Sometimes they were just sincerely interested, but many times I could see a sense of disapproval there.
Would you like to respond?
Well, I really don't have an answer to that question.
Well, I realized I was different than other people when I was in the third grade because I had holes in my socks one day, and I'm from Tennessee, and even though I've lived here most of my life, and the kids at school saw the socks, I don't know who started it, but pretty soon there was a group of kids in a circle around me, taunting me and calling me hillbilly, which I didn't know what it meant, but they were very cruel, and then I realized that I was just a little bit different because I didn't have the means that they had. I did get that even in the third grade, that I didn't have because they didn't have holes in their socks.
When were you aware of people from different racial, ethnic, religious, or social groups? Can you recall an experience or a time?
Well, when you're growing up as a child, I don't think you realize the difference in people. Mm-hmm. I don't think I did. It wasn't until later in adult life, really. But living in Mesa, we didn't have that diversity as we have now. This is the early years in the 30s and 40s, so it's going back some. Mm-hmm. And even in my high school graduation group, I think there were only... the only minority was 4 of us Japanese and 1 Spanish, and we didn't have any black students at all. And this is in 34. So that's when I, realized it, but it didn't affect any of us. We just all ran around together, and of course, been a Mormon community primarily. Well, I think that made another difference because they were all very kind and good to us.
Mr. Livingston, did you have a comment?
Well, as far as Mesa is concerned, I'd like to say that I agree that we did. I realized it even in junior high school. I came to Mesa when I was in 8th grade, and we were treated very well, and especially at school and around. It's just that at the end of school, you always went back to your own lifestyle or your own place. There was a lot of people. I would like to indicate that a couple of times at Mesa High we had on bus trips, things were quite differently. When we used to go to Yuma, which happened only every one year or two, most of the blacks, we couldn't eat in the places, so they give us money so we could buy something from grocery stores. And we'd eat at the bus or eat under a shade tree or whatever, And it wasn't that many of us, about 4 or 5 of us, but we always got our money and had to go buy something to eat and come back and eat. That was in the late 50s, middle late 50s.
Okay. When was the first time that you ever witnessed someone being treated differently because of their apparent differences? Was there ever a time that you had actually seen that, and then maybe you can kind of share with us what were your feelings if you did see something such as that?
There was a case in my own home that really bothered me a lot. I think I was only 6 years old. It was one of my first memories, but it concerned me a lot, and that was when there was a woman who was helping my parents. I don't even remember why she was there. I don't think she worked for us for a long period of time, but we were all sitting down to dinner in the dining room. And my family at that time always ate in the dining room. In our house, we always eat in the kitchen. But anyway, so I said, well, why is this woman, why isn't she sitting out here with us? And she was African American, but I don't think that was the reason. I think it was the fact that she was working for us and she was not part of the family. And so I said, well, she should come out and eat with us. They said, no. I said, well, then I'm going to eat in the kitchen. And so they said, okay, that's all right. So I remember eating, and it just really bothered me, and that kind of stayed with me to this point. It's been a long time.
Did you say anything to the individual who was eating in the other room?
Not about the circumstances.
Right.
No, I don't. Well, I don't remember. I was pretty young, but and I don't remember we had a big conversation or anything. We both just sat there and ate our dinner.
How did your parents respond to your behavior? Do you recall?
Oh, I think they were good. I think basically they were not prejudiced people, but they were just used to doing things a certain way.
Right.
And they said, well, that's fine. You know, if you want to sit there, that's fine. You can do that. So they didn't, it wasn't like I was punished or given any negative feedback, but I didn't change the family way of doing things either.
But obviously that had a profound impact on you because you remember that experience despite your young age. Anyone else ever have maybe a similar experience such as?
Well, I don't recall observing anything except I experienced it myself. Let's see, this was when I was in high school, and a bunch of us on Saturdays, decided to go to a theater, and we had just one theater in Mesa here, the Now Theater downtown. This is years ago, and it's the first time we ventured to go to a theater, about 5 of us. And when we walked in, we bought our tickets and walked in, and they wouldn't let us sit in the middle aisle. Now theater was divided, the 2 side aisles, and then the middle aisle. And my friends started sitting, and the usher came up and said that I wasn't allowed to sit in the middle. I had to sit on the side where the minorities were sitting, and we didn't have that, large of a population among the minorities.
Right,
Maybe a few Indians would come up from the reservation, and very few Mexicans and blacks. So my friends were embarrassed for me, and we walked out. And another occasion was, we usually have senior ditch days when we're seniors.
Oh, you were ditching during that time?
No. I wasn't ditching.
Oh, okay.
But the senior class went over to the Tempe swimming pool for ditch day. And let's see, I think there was, I guess I was the only minority at the time, because there was one other Mexican in the graduating class. And as I mentioned, there were 4 of us, but I was the only one, Japanese who went. And they wouldn't let me in. They said that we weren't allowed to go swimming, so it was very embarrassing. And my friends were embarrassed for me as well as, the faculty member. But there wasn't anything they could do about it, so I didn't get to go swimming, and I had to wait till
Did you ever think about challenging that rule, that policy, that you couldn't swim or sit in a certain area?
Oh, no, not that. You know, I was really a senior in high school. I should have been, you know, aware of something like that, but I was really shocked that they wouldn't let us go in. I really was. So there wasn't anything like challenging. I just waited until the day was over with.
Right.
But that was embarrassing, and I've never experienced anything like that since. But those are the two incidents that I always remember
Yes.
that happened in Mesa. Otherwise, you know, they've all been friendly, especially growing up in Lehigh. Everyone knew everyone, and in fact, when the war broke out, they were very kind to us. So, but those two incidents when I was a senior was very embarrassing. It's something one doesn't forget.
Yeah. It really affects you for life.
Oh, it did.
That type of situation.
It did. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
Well,
Jonni?
I didn't know that there was a difference in people, you know, of color-wise. I really didn't, because I was bused to Lehigh from Mesa, and I sat between two little Japanese boys, and there were several of the Pima Indians, I'm sure they were Pimas, in our class. And so I thought we were all the same.
Sure.
You know, you grow up thinking that, and then I went back to Tennessee, and this is my first time of ever realizing that people were different, because I have claustrophobia. It's the reason I'm sitting here, so I can see that door. You know, I'm serious. So when we went down to Memphis, and we got on the bus, and I immediately marched to the back of the bus. I was in the
Really?
8th grade. And my cousins were horrified. They says, "You can't sit back there." And I says, "I want to know why not. There's a seat here." Because it was right by the door where I could get out if I had to, you know. And they were just livid at me.
my.
And they said, "Look around you." And I looked, and I didn't see any difference. And they said, "Do you see a different color sitting there by you?"
Wow.
And they just kept on, and they would not let me sit back there with the black people. And my parents had told us that the black people were good. They were the same as us. And a black lady down that lane, when my mother was carrying me, is the only reason my mother didn't starve to death. I was born during the Great Depression. And this lady would come over to my mother and say, "Naomi, I just have an extra can of peaches. Would you like to have them? Or these are going to go to waste if you don't." And so in our life, we have been very blessed by the black people. So I don't know why they wouldn't let me sit with them.
Did you challenge your cousins?
Of
on
course
this?
I did.
Yeah.
You know my temperament. Didn't do me a bit of good, but unfortunately my whole family's that way. So I didn't make any difference in their life, but it made a difference in mine.
Of course, though, you know, by you standing up for what you felt was right and standing up for, in essence, justice, you may have sent an unspoken message to your cousins that impacted them
I hope
in a
so.
positive way.
I hope so.
Was there anyone else who'd like to share at a particular time?
Well, I would just like to comment on making a challenge, challenging some of the things. See, when I first came to Mesa in 52 and 3, the blacks at that time, we had one Thursday that we could go skating at Rendezvous Park, one Thursday a month. And nobody challenged it because we looked forward to it, because
Okay.
it itself was an improvement.
I see.
Because before that, they couldn't go at all. And as far as, and when I come there, you know, we come from the country. Gosh, this was big city, and, you know, look forward to that. We didn't challenge it, we looked forward to it. And now we hope eventually that we could get things improved, but you didn't really challenge it. As far as going to the movies, you didn't challenge it, you accepted it. Because some of us that had come out of the South, you either had to sit in the balconies or not go to the movie, or had one little corner. And, you know, you either sit there or you didn't go. And back in those days, nobody was pretty much in position to challenge those things. And gradually, over a period of time, people began to question a few things. Just as an example, when I, all the way into the 1960s, when I went to Dallas to play with the Cowboys, there was still black and white water in most of the stores
Really?
that you were supposed to use. And even as a professional athlete, they expected you. But as far as challenges, the times began to change, because even down there, some of the young kids was challenging the water thing. I'm gonna drink out of any water I want to, and they'd go drink out of it. No, most people. But that's because the times and everything had begun to set the stage for it. So as far as challenging some of the things, you can see as things open up, every little bit helps.
Yes.
So sometimes, and in the early years, what you would challenge now in 2 months, it might have took 10 years to break open a little door.
Very good. Very insightful. Warren, was there, you said that you had the opportunity to skate, was it one day out of an entire month, and so you look forward to doing that. Were there any temptations to maybe sneak in there and skate more than one day out of the month?
No. Well, the other thing we had that helped it along with, you had to save your money to go at one time, because things become tight. And it wasn't one day. You went that night from about 6 to 10 or 7 to 10. I don't remember what it was. You didn't skate during the day. They would open up at night. And occasionally we used to go by there, because Rendezvous Park, which is baseball park, was right there in the same area. And sometime we would, it's right there where the Civic Plaza and everything is, right on Center Street.
Okay.
Sometime we would pass by there when they were skating, and maybe we'd peep in and see people skating, but we had no, one thing, we didn't probably have enough to get in if they'd let us in. But we'd look in sometimes. But no, we didn't really have a temptation to try to get in and skate.
Okay. Good. When was there a time that you can recall that you were proud of your race or your ethnicity or your religion or being a member of a particular social group? Can you recall any particular incident in your life?
Well, the only time that I can recall was, it's been more in recent years, about 11, 12 years ago. My brother had accidentally killed himself when he was a senior in high school and so forth. And he had told me as he lay dying that tell Coach Cucci for the team to carry on, because there was going to be a game with Gilbert High School the next night. And eventually they adopted the motto, carry on. And one of the board members, it's been about 12, 13 years ago, decided to name one of the new schools the Zito Ishikawa School. And so our family, we were in tears. We were very honored.
Yes.
And we just, couldn't believe it. But that's one time that I think we were all very proud and thankful and grateful to the community and to the board members. Right.
Very proud moment.
Yes, it was.
Yes. And that's good for our kids to hear over at Mesa High School. Where did this model come from? It's excellent.
So having attended Mesa High many years later, I can attest to the fact that in sports, and especially on the football team, at that time, every player that went through had drilled into them the motto and the pride that we had with it. And we all learned and heard the story of how the motto came about. Now this was, I don't know that they're doing it now, but that was all the way through my high school year. And every class that came through, and not just the motto, but everybody, it got to the point when you heard that carry on, you'd feel tingling inside of you.
Yes.
And so, I'm saying that because this is in the middle, late 50s, that motto, we all learned where it come from. We all had the story that I can't say as good as Susie, but and it did. It really made you want to put out 100%, or as they say in this day, 110% for Mesa High.
Great. I know my daughter just recently graduated from Mesa High School, and she played varsity volleyball for them, and of course she was always involved in a lot of activities there. and in her room, she has on her wall "Carry
Carry
On."
On, yeah.
And I asked her, I
Oh.
said, "Do you know the story behind that?" And she said, "Well, I've heard bits and pieces of the story, but she didn't know the full story. But you know, when I see her, she's now attending U of A. I'm going to talk with her about
Oh.
that, and I'm hoping that the folks over at Ishikawa will share this story also with their students. It's something that we shouldn't forget."
Very good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Can you recall the very first time that you had a very intimate friendship with someone who was of a different race or ethnicity or religion than yourself? I mean, there was that really close bond, and maybe you can elaborate and tell our audience, what was it that drew the two or three of you together?
Like I said a while ago, I never knew there was a difference in people, but in the 8th grade, I met a girl that was a Jew, and she was treated differently. And I really liked her, and so I didn't realize that to be a Jew was a religion. I thought Jew meant a person, and you know, from Shakespeare really, I love Shakespeare with a passion, but he did them an disservice. Because people were making fun of her a lot more than they ever did. I mean, hillbilly, I've learned, isn't really that bad a thing to be called. But a Jew and the slurs that were given to her were terrible. So I asked her, I said, "Sandra, can you tell me what you really believe? I'd like to know what you believe." And I know it was a different child, I recognized this, but she told me to read the first 5 books of the Old Testament 5 times, and then I would understand her religion and her as a person. And I did, because I valued her friendship until I learned, you know, what a neat person and what neat beliefs. And if you've read the Old Testament, you know 2 of those books are extremely boring. You know, the begats, and they did this and this and this. But I was determined that friendship meant more to me than the boredom.
Yes,
And she's gone on to become a millionaire in life. I'm not going to tell you her name, but she's one that has one of these frozen fish companies.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
Wow.
So every time we eat frozen fish, we're helping her.
Gosh. Okay. Was there any other friendships that were developed?
Well, I had a couple in high school. One with Mexican American, I guess we'll use that name. Actually, some of those names, you know, like Susan was referring is African Americans. I had never heard that name until, you know, in the 70s. So I had never heard, you know,
Right.
you know, we weren't referred to as African Americans.
Right.
Right.
And but I had a Mexican American friend, and I had a Caucasian, a white friend. We were friends at school, and we kind of hung out together at lunch, and sometimes they would buy me lunch. But we weren't really together after school, because we went our separate ways. But at school, we were inseparable.
Right.
We did homework together sometime. We played together and did things like that. So, you know, I value them as a very good friends.
So what I hear the two of you saying is that, well, number one, you have to be willing to reach out to those individuals who are different from you, and number two, to find out more information about them. And it sounds to me like, you know, that is a very simple way of creating friendship between those who may appear to be different. And the chances are extremely high that what you found was that you're more alike than different.
I think so often that
That's true.
you become friends with a person because you have something in common. For example, Susie and I became friends, I think, when her husband died, and I also was on my own at that point, and we decided that we would like to spend some time together and started going to concerts together. We both love music, we both love history, and found that we had a lot in common, and started to have a lot of activities we participated with together and became friends in that way.
So you didn't allow that difference to create a barrier
Well,
between the two of you?
it seemed insignificant.
Right.
It was insignificant.
But I'm grateful to Sarah. She's been a wonderful friend.
Good. Let's, we're almost finished, but let's ask just a couple more questions. And this one I'm going to ask you to kind of, really take a hard look. You folks have been here in Mesa. You've seen an incredible amount of change that is going on, especially now as we move into the millennium. How do you think that Mesa is doing in regards to building and fortifying relationships and bringing all different groups together as one community? What are your thoughts? And we might, take into consideration our local government, our schools, our businesses, our individual selves. How are we doing?
I think in a way it's a positive development that there's now an awareness that this is something that needs to be done. I happen to be in a group that interviewed people who wanted to be in the Mesa Leadership Training and Development class of 2001, and probably a third of the people said that one of the biggest challenges that Mesa has is trying to unify it. And so there is a recognition that this is something that needs to be done. As the city grows, it becomes more difficult for people to get to know a lot of different people. We're never going to know everybody in Mesa when we're over 400,000 people.
That's right.
But at the same time, I think we have a long ways to go because there are so many different groups in the city now, and geographically they're further apart, and it's not all the same high school. We have so many different high schools that it makes it something that's more difficult to achieve.
The Mesa Historical Museum was 2 years ago, wasn't it, when we did the diversity? We decided to do 2 years of diversity covering the different groups that were here. And Rita Kellis was our educator at that time, and she did a lot of research, and it was mind-boggling when you realized how many, it was in the hundreds, that there are that many different groups. We think, because we came from that age, that you think of Hispanic and the Black and the Caucasian. But then as we started doing this, I think everybody that came to our programs gained a great love of these people. We had the Vietnamese there, we had Scandinavian countries there, we had South American countries there, and it was really impressive because you found out they're just like you and I. Same feelings, same goals, and the Korean group was especially wonderful. And they just adopted a couple of us into their culture, and we've been invited to go, which is kind of different. I mean, I went to a drum concert you'll never believe. I didn't know that they could do a whole concert in drums. But they're wonderful, wonderful people. And you learned, I think that we as a museum body really learned to love all these diverse people and recognize what they have given to the community. That is what is so neat.
Great.
Yes, Mesa has really changed, and we're such a big city now that it's really difficult to see which direction we're going in. But like the program that we did for the Mesa Museum, as Jonni says, I think that's been an eye-opener, as she said, and we realized there's so many people from different, countries and groups that I think it's been an education for us, and it's been a plus for those of us who've lived here, and just associated with our own friends and so forth. So it's really been an educational challenge. And as she said, we all enjoyed the program and the diversity of the people.
Warren, would you like to comment?
Well, I would just like to say, well, you know, Mesa has come such a long way, and one of the main things that I'm so happy about is the job opportunities. And this goes way back, because I knew we had a lot of young blacks that when we come out of high school and even going to college, you had to move. There was no jobs here in Mesa. You couldn't be on the police force. You couldn't work downtown. You couldn't be a fireman. Essentially, if you didn't want to go to the fields, and I'm going back to the 50s and 60s, and that's even in the 60s, starting in the 60s, they gradually began to open up a few things that you could do. There was a couple of blacks that got service station jobs and janitorial jobs down, and that was the top jobs for the blacks, except the fields, I mean. So I know a lot of people that went to school and college and wanted to live here. They didn't show you any homes here either, unless you unless you wanted to go back to that little mile section where we all lived. You could. And I know a few people, I'm not gonna call them by name, that actually wanted to move in Mesa, live in Mesa. You know, they didn't want to live in that area. They wanted to a nice home. The realtors wouldn't even hardly show you around. And I've heard even in the last 10 or 12 years that they avoided some section when you had realtors take you around, but I don't know that that's a fact. So I'm really glad now that I see people working in different things, and you know, if you want to put, matter of fact, they're hiring. If you want to get on the police force, which I kind of dread, I just admire all the policemen because put their life on the line too much.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
But that's the main thing I'm interested in the home situation and the job situation. It's just so much greater. And the biggest thing we have with the young people, and I know with my kids, the level of expectation has changed so much.
Yes.
See, things that I would think is astronomical, they think, well, that's normal.
Right.
So
Right.
that's so everything is relative to their level of expectation.
Right.
So it's hard to talk to an old timer, and you know what I'm thrilled about. They think it's commonplace.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I moved here, maybe about 12, 13 years ago, and just within that short span of time, I have seen some incredible change in terms of bringing folks together, of the different groups that we see in the Mesa community. Is there room for improvement? In my opinion, sure there is.
Yes.
But I think you will find that anywhere that you go throughout the United States. It's about a process. Things are not going to just change overnight. But I think, from my perspective, I think that Mesa has really progressed. And as we see our future generations coming up, and as we talk more and more about diversity, and we create more of an awareness and an appreciation with the drums and other cultural traditions and practices. Yeah, I think we're on our way, and I would like to be around to see that. May not be, but I really feel that we're headed in the right direction. We're about to close, and I want to give each one of you an opportunity to give a message to our young people out there. You know, our young people are faced with just a huge amount of challenges out there in the world. Much more so than you and I could have even imagined, and we have to prepare them for a world that is full of diversity, that is truly pluralistic in every sense. Technology, high stakes assessment, social ills. Given your experiences, what lasting message would you like to give to our young people out there? And Sarah, we'll start with you.
Just to look for the best in people and to look at what unifies you rather than what divides you. And we're going to have natural inclinations towards people of certain personalities, but to remember that's more important than the external factors. That really, if you can just keep in mind that the benefits of seeing people of all different types.
My answer to that is so simplistic, probably is maybe too simple, but I feel like when you meet people, you treat them exactly like you want to be treated. And I think you always invite people into your business, your home, or whatever, and treat them like it is their home. And I feel like the founding fathers of our country in writing the Declaration of Independence really and truly summed it up when they said all men are created equal. And they didn't designate which ones weren't. And I feel like that's important, really important. And I feel like I failed in a lot of things as a mother, but my middle child has got this in him to treat all people fair, and I feel like I've succeeded with him. And when in our church we have a thing that they bless a baby, give a baby a blessing and a name. And his blessing to the baby was the most unusual blessing I've ever heard. He blessed Rachel, and she's 12 years old today, or yesterday, that she would love all mankind, that she would seek to know the people and the differences and make them part of her life.
Wow.
And I've watched this little girl do exactly that, not realizing what she was blessed with. She has a love of all people.
Wow.
And that's why I say mine's so simple, just to love other people, you know.
Thank you, John.
I think that's very true. But with my children, I always told them that they have to be honest with themselves more than anything, and always respect your parents and teachers. At least that's the way I was brought up. My parents used to say, the teachers are the most important in your life, not doctors or lawyers or any other profession. So I've always remembered that. But more than anything, I think we have to tell our children they have to be honest with themselves, that they're not any better than anyone else, and we treat them with respect and love them, as Jonni was saying. And if we do this, I think that the young people will be very successful in life and have a happy life.
Yes. Very good.
I'd just like to say, back to the golden rule, I think you treat other people as you yourself would like to be treated. And I like the honesty, because the part that I always told my kids, you're going to meet people that's going to rub you wrong.
Sure. Sure.
But respect them, respect what they have, and when you meet someone new, irregardless of the race, try to get to know them as individuals. Because most of us, even though we try, we carry around some of these stereotypes in our minds we're being bombarded with. And that's why sometimes when you meet somebody individually and learn about them and become friends with them, you're shocked. That's because it doesn't match what you've carried around all the time.
Exactly.
And I would say that you're going to have, like my coach used to say, there's going to be some times when you feel like quitting, but you got to hang in there, and then this will pass, and you'll be able to get along a lot better with everyone. And it really pays off in the future. That's what I would tell the young people.
Yes. Very good. Well, that ends our session today. We had 4 wonderful guests who were willing to volunteer their experiences. In closing, we can learn a lot from history. Some of us out there think that, those things happened in the past. But, The funny thing about history is this, and I'll use an analogy. History is like when you throw a rock into a pond. There is a splash, and then you see the ripples. So history impacts each and every one of us, now and even into the future. And what I heard in our discussion today is that we need to move beyond tolerance. Tolerance simply says, hey, I'm going to put up with you. We need to move towards respect. Respect says, I understand that we may have some differences, but despite our differences, we can come together, and we can come together through understanding, through communication. And so I want to thank our guests today, Ms. Zafra, Ms. Judd, Ms. Sato, and Mr. Livingston. And I hope that this was a very worthwhile learning for you today. And take care. Take the messages with you. This is Cliff Moon, Diversity Specialist for Mesa Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you.